on some of those issues. So let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff we do in Australia, and then maybe we can take some time and think about how that might work or be adapted to Thailand. So in a nutshell, the aim of the urban stormwater drainage system is to ensure that any stormwater that is being generated from upstream in the catchment basically causes as little damage and danger and nuisance and risk to life as possible as it comes flying through the catchment, and that we're managing that water as it passes through. To do that, we need obviously appropriate conveyance. So we talked about the bypass channel before to convey the water around where we're getting flooding and bring it out and around. And then we also need adequate storage to be able to hold the water in certain places where it's not causing a problem, so that it then protects other areas where it would cause a problem. So that's the two main concepts that we generally work with. But we've also got to think about how that fits in with nature-based solutions and amenity and water quality and all the other stuff we've been talking about, just to make it complicated. So in Australia, let me say in Victoria specifically, but generally in Australia, we have this concept of a minor and a major drainage system within our urban areas. So we talk about a minor flow path and then a major. Roddy, got similar ideas, got a similar system?
I'm not sure.
Let me explain first and then we'll discuss. Yeah. All right. So the minor drainage system is the pipe drainage system. So that's what's carrying the water under the streets, out of sight, out of mind, and conveying it through the drainage system and taking it out to the waterway. But that minor drainage system will only ever be designed to a certain level of service, because we can't design infinitely large pipes, infinitely large storages underground and all that sort of thing. So at some point that system will be overtopped, it'll be overwhelmed, and it will come back into the public realm and into the open spaces, into the roads that we see. So we have the major drainage system, and that's when we exceed that capacity. And the way we manage that in Australia is, let's say we're doing a new development, what we'll do is we'll design the minor drainage system to carry all the flows up to a certain design storm event. And in Victoria, we use the 1 in 5 year ARI, if you use annual recurrence interval terminology, or we're now calling it the 1 in 20% annual exceedance probability. So a storm event that's got a probability of being exceeded of 20% in any one given year. Do you use that terminology in Thailand, or do you use the
in Thailand, actually in the city?
Yeah.
Maybe in your definition is a minor flow path.
Yeah.
Because the government construction the tunnel under the street.
Yeah.
And collect the water for the drainage.
Yeah.
And for the rural area is a major flow path like an open channel.
Yeah.
But now when we try to extend the road of the street, we already got the open channel and make it to be a hole, like a tunnel under the street.
Oh yeah. Turn it into a tunnel, but it's a major flow conveyance. So you're putting it underground, but it's a major flow conveyance, capturing the infrequent storm events. Yeah. So you're probably mixing and matching these concepts a little. So the general idea here is that when we get a small storm event, rains every other day, or we get a 1 in 1 year event that happens once a year or 2 years, something like that, that should be drained away fairly easily and not cause too much disturbance to people or too much problem. But then we say, when we get a big event that we can't handle within that system, or we're not willing to spend the money, what we will do is we'll actually design the roadway so that the water will flow down the road. So it's not flooding anyone's property, it's visible, it's annoying, cars are having to drive through the water, whatever, but it's not causing too much damage. So we'll design these two systems to work together. So the pipes will handle the small part of the flows, and then these roadways, we might have it going to open space, and then we'll let that area flood perhaps. So one thing we'll often do is if there's a low-lying area, we'll say that's open space, and then we'll use that to hold some of the water. We'll put a detention basin within that and use that to slow down the water and hold it, and then we'll release it slowly into the minor drainage system downstream. So the idea is that these two work together to provide effective protection, and the priority is that we don't want anyone's property, anyone's house to be flooded. So the idea is that if we build a new development area, no one's house should be flooded in that area. And the design standard we have for that is the 1 in 100 year annual recurrence interval, or the 1% AEP. So any new houses in Victoria, we're designing it so they should only flood, or only have a chance of flooding of 1%, or hopefully better. So that's what we're designing to. Now the reality, of course, same as you guys in Thailand, is that any existing areas aren't meeting those standards, and they weren't necessarily designed to those standards. And even if they were, the density of our urban areas has increased. Because of climate change, we've seen an increase in intensity of our rainfall events. So for every 1 degree of global warming that we have, we might see something like a 5% increase in the intensity of those events. And that means that whatever we built back in the 1950s and the 1960s already doesn't have as much capacity as we originally intended. And it's already, being overwhelmed at these design events. But that's the intention. Pretty much covered that. So then the major drainage system, that should be protecting all those private lots. And then we add another layer, and we say we also want to have some freeboard, because we know that our calculations and our drainage stuff is not perfect. And we know that in the real world, stuff happens. So we calculate the flood surface is going to be here, but that's not really the flood surface. We know that, with flow coming down, sometimes the energy line is higher than that. We know that if a car drives through it, there's waves, all sorts of other things going on. Climate change, maybe that ends up being a little bit higher in a few years. So we have an allowance for that as well. Actually, I'm skipping ahead here, and we call that freeboard. So basically the intention of that is to allow for inaccuracies in our modelling, settling, etc. And so we ask that the floor levels are actually a certain level above that flood level. We don't just build it at the flood level. We say it's got to be 300 mil above that flood level in sort of typical areas. And then where there's a waterway, natural waterway or a retarding basin or a detention basin in the area, we say it's got to be 600 mil to the building floor level, 300 to the lot, 600 to the building. So it's quite a bit of extra freeboard that we're providing. So there has been some discussion recently about whether the freeboard is there to account for climate change. And the feedback has been no, the freeboard should be allowing for these other issues, inaccuracies, etc. We shouldn't be relying on it to allow for climate change. So the latest guidance we've got is saying not only should we design to these standards, but we should be taking, sorry, pointing at the right thing. It's gone to sleep. But we should be taking into account future climate change. So we're not just modelling for the current intensity of rainfall, but we're looking at what it's going to be in a period of time in the future, and then we're actually designing for that as well. So we're trying to build a lot of factors of safety in. That sounds great, and it works very well. Three? Yeah, thanks. Yeah. All right. But the reality is in our existing urban areas that we still have lots of flooding problems, just as you do. Maybe not quite as severe, but we certainly have our share of problems. So, we see overland flow paths like this, and they're coming right through private property and they're flooding those areas. So we have guidelines for that. And essentially what we're looking for is that you need to manage the depth of the water coming through those areas, so it shouldn't exceed a certain level. And then we also look at the depth times the velocity of the product. So it's looking at the safety of that flow coming through, because you can have a shallow flow, but if it's moving very quickly, it can still be dangerous. So it's trying to account for those two factors. So we have some requirements about what we can put through our new subdivisions, and that says that the depth in that roadway shouldn't be more than 300 millimetres, but also that the depth times the velocity shouldn't exceed a certain amount, so that that water is safely moving through that subdivision. So that's the standards that we'll design that system to these days. Okay. Yeah, one more. We'll go on to sleep on it. Which one? Yep, that's it. Sorry, one before it. So that's what we do in terms of the drainage system and conveyance. But the second thing that we do when we're doing new development areas is that we design these storages called retarding basins, so it's retarding or it's slowing down the flow, or detention basins or detention ponds. So detention means that it's slowing down the water and holding it temporarily and then letting it go. Thank you. So the whole idea of this is about managing the peak flows. So remember you had your bypass here and you said that your peak flow is 200 cubic metres a second, so that's what we're managing for. So the whole idea of these detention basins is to manage for the peak flow. It's not managing the volume of water, because the same volume still goes through, but it's trying to change the timing of that so that it's something that the downstream drainage system can handle. And essentially this is a balance between how much storage do you need to provide effective detention versus what are the size of the pipes downstream. You can build bigger pipes and less storage, you can build bigger storage and less pipes. It's up to us, essentially. But if you've already built the pipes downstream, then you're constrained by that. So you've got to size the storage to get the flow down to what pipes downstream can handle. So that's sort of a typical requirement we'll have. If you're building somewhere, you've got a lot of urban areas downstream, you've got to attenuate the flows coming off that new development such that you're not making flooding worse for anybody downstream, and that flow you're discharging can fit within those pipes. Not easy. So the two critical things with the design of these then is the storage volume, so how much water it can hold and the shape of that, but also the configuration of the outlet and how much water it releases and what the timing of that is. So let's look at a diagram to try and make that a little more concrete. Imagine we've got a period of time and then we've got flow, so the flow rate here. So we've got a storm event coming, happens over a very short period of time, we get a very large peak flow for that storm event, and then it tails off and drops off. Nice, beautiful looking design storm event. They're never that pretty in real life. As it flows into that retarding basin, that water gets absorbed into the system and held within the storage and then slowly released. So the idea is that it will then cut the top off that peak and slow that flow down and absorb it, but then release it over a longer period of time. So we're trying to flatten the peak and then spread it out over a longer period of time. That's the concept. So these were, okay, so this is your volume of water here, and then this is what we're trying to capture. So it's very different to your bypass arrangement, where you're just trying to design it large enough to just get the water away as quick as you can. It's about having enough storage. So there's two things we need to think about here. It's not only the peak, but it's also how long is that storm event going for. So you can imagine you might have several different storm events. That's a 1 hour storm, and then a 2 hour storm's here, and then a 4 hour storm's here, a 24 hour storm's here. So we've then got to ask which of these storms is going to have the greatest effect on our combined storage and drainage system. Because you might find the 1 hour storm creates a huge peak, but we're able to capture that and absorb it relatively easily because it was just a short, really intense storm. You had 150 mil an hour falling, but it only lasted for 1 hour and then it was gone. We can capture that. But if we get 50 mil of rainfall falling and it falls for 6 hours, that's actually more volume of water that we're dealing with. And so that might mean that this retarding basin actually has a higher outflow after the longer storm event. So then we've got a design for that one as well, and it's whichever of these storm events is producing the highest outflow peak that becomes critical. So this is how we generally go about designing retarding basins in Australia, and the requirement for each development is that they're designing these such that they're bringing the post-development peaks back to the pre-development conditions, and they're retarding that and attenuating it over time. So it's a simplistic way of sort of trying to manage the storage volumes in the system and the timing, so that everyone's slowing the flow down. So if we're doing a new development, we'll have the development planning phase, we'll do the master planning, we'll work out where the waterways are going, we'll do our subdivision, and we'll design this flood detention storage. So it's a major part of any new greenfield development we're doing. Where is the detention storage going? How large is that storage going to be? And then we do all the pits and pipes and drainage, and then we do the stormwater quality, we do the wetlands, put the wetlands in the bottom of these detention basins. So one thing that's helped us with getting nature-based solutions in is that people already have to do the flood detention, they already have to do the retarding basins. So When they do the water quality, they just put the wetland in the floor of the detention basin. So it's no additional land take for the developer. They're just using the same space, using it a bit smarter. In the vast majority of cases in Australia, we separate the stormwater and the sewage. So this is just dealing with the stormwater system. We then ideally design it such that it's not getting into the sewer systems and causing combined sewer overflows and so forth. The second thing is that we always design the systems with gravity if it's in any way humanly possible. So Melbourne Water hate pump systems. So if there's any way of getting gravity drainage, we do it by gravity. For obvious reasons, it's a lot cheaper, not depending on a pump that can fire. So that's the majority of these systems, but not all. So pumps are used in a few catchments. So there's some around Port Phillip Bay, South Melbourne and places like that, where the ground level is only just above sea level. In some places it's almost below it, but it's only just above the sea level, and when the tide's high they can't actually get drainage out to the sea, just like you guys have in Bangkok and places there when the tide's up. So in those areas we actually pump it and push it out to sea. I've got another example I'll show you later where we do it. Now, real-time control systems are really in their infancy. So we're actively managing the system, we're turning on the pumps, we're pumping the water out when we need to. We're now doing trials of how to do that for distributed systems of rainwater tanks. We've got a couple of systems around in the country that do this, but we're way behind you guys. Because I understand you've had this operating for 30 years or so, that you've got the ability to control some of your systems and turn the gates on and off. Is that still correct? So that means you've got the ability to remotely control your weirs, so you can open the weir or close the weir, you can open the floodgates, shut the floodgates when you know a flood's coming.
Floodgate. เรามีระบบที่แบบเปิดปิดประตูระบายน้ำเปิดปิดฝายอะไรอย่างนี้มานานแล้วนะฝายทำไงเรามีมานานแล้วอ่ะ yes
Quick answer. Yeah.
อันนี้ถามคือถามเลยนะถามเป็นเรียนถามใจในบัญชี
เรามีสกาล่าคนมีอยู่มีแต่ว่ามีมานานแล้วแต่ว่าไม่ใช่ทุกที่
So they only have irrigation gates in some
areas.
In some areas.
Yeah.
And are they serviced by IoT or are they mostly manual?
Mostly manual. Some we use SCADA.
Yeah. So it's probably true to say the same here. Most of them are manually operated, but some are automatically operated and opened and closed. Particularly for the drainage, we very rarely use remote controlled systems. For irrigation more so. So to give you a bit of process, and it's worth thinking that I'm talking about an urban development, but there's no reason that you couldn't be doing this somewhere upstream in your catchment, upstream of this bypass to try and capture and hold and retain some of the water. There's no reason that that couldn't be one of these storages that we were talking about before that's helping this overflow. So the same process would apply, same thinking, just you've got a much larger catchment to deal with and a few other challenges. So what we'll do is we'll identify a suitable location, and essentially what we're looking for is where is the low point for that area, because that's where all the water is going to come. So we want to pick up as much of the water from the catchment as possible from that development or from the broader catchment area. So we'll work out where the low points are, where the contours are going, where they're bringing the water, and then we'll put the retarding basins in those low points where we can, and where we can then carry the water further downstream through the catchment. Usually we use some kind of computer model to design those systems, and they'll be designed with design storm events, not continuous simulation. So we'll design them to, let's say, a 1% annual exceedance probability design storm event, but then we'll run a series of different durations through and we'll see what happens to that system and what are the peak flows coming out for those different durations. As I mentioned, we're now doing that for climate change, and we're also doing multiple different storm events We used to do it with just one particular design storm event of a given shape. What we've realised is that that doesn't work well in practice because every storm is different. So you've got to design these systems to handle a whole range of different things so that people can't optimise it to just handle one situation that will probably never happen. Once the design's done, we go into development, construction. They'll do the bulk earthworks for the development, and they'll lay out the roads, they'll flatten the ground, do whatever they need to do, and then they'll dig out the space for the retarding basins and the storages and the wetlands, and they'll do all that at the same time. And the advantage of doing that is because the developer knows that they have to do that in advance and they're doing it all at the same time, they can bring in big earth moving machinery, and it becomes very cost effective for them to do it all at the same time. So we get some economies of scale by planning it all together. Post-construction, obviously we then need to go into maintenance and we need to look after these assets. Retardant basins aren't too difficult. Mostly it's just cleaning up after you've got a flood, cleaning out any debris, any vegetation, that sort of thing. Outside that, it's just mowing the grass, cutting down the trees, or trimming the trees if there's too much vegetation growing in them. So it's relatively simple maintenance most of the time. It's also important to check the structures. Because these systems are designed to hold and retain water, we have to make sure that they're structurally sound so that they're not at risk of breaking when we get a flood. So we also have to operate these systems as dams. Even though they're only holding water during a flood, we have to treat them as a dam and assess them as a dam and say what would happen, what's the worst that can happen if these systems break and the wall collapses. So we've also got to consider some of those things. So I'd like to talk about a bit of an example, and hopefully this helps to bridge some of the gap between some of the urban stuff we've been talking about today and some of the challenges you're facing in the rural areas. So we're in Melbourne, in the centre of Victoria essentially, or in the south, but more or less in the middle. 6 hours drive to the northwest is Mildura, which is located right on the edge of the state, and very much in a very dry area. It's on the Murray River, so the Murray River forms the northern boundary for the state. It runs along the top and it passes just north of Mildura. So the Murray River, the Murray River and the Darling River together are the largest river system in Australia. So obviously we have quite a large waterway coming past here, which creates some opportunities for agriculture. Now, at the moment, Mildura are looking to expand. Growing population, more people want to live there, not sure why. 2 weeks ago they had a week of 45 degrees plus. Not kidding. So I don't know why anyone wants to live there. But people do, and they're looking to expand the town and they're looking to expand the industry. Now they've got a small town right next to Mildura called Ironpool. And you were talking before about the town that sits in the bowl earlier. The town that sits in the bottom of the bowl and it gets flooded. That's Ironpool. It's exactly the same situation. They've literally said, where's the bottom of the bowl? Let's build a town here. And that probably worked initially for a little while. But they're doing the same thing. They're expanding the town, and as they expand the town and it gets bigger, there's more and more impervious surfaces on the edge of the bowl. And when it rains now, all the water runs down into the bottom of the bowl, into the centre of town where all the businesses are and all the economic investment is. Great idea. Not only that, but the bowl is landlocked, so it can't actually drain back to the river. So they have to actively pump the water from the bowl and take it somewhere else to get the water out, just to make it more challenging. So we have a constrained outlet capacity. It's very limited capacity to get water out of the system. So basically what we're finding is we have to provide way more storage here than we might normally design, because normally we've got a free outlet and we're just gravity draining out. Here we have to pump every drop of water we get in our storage. So we've really got to think about how do we manage that peak flow. Remember that graph I had before? These ones? So we've really got to think about how do we manage these peak flows and bring that right down, because we've got to bring it to within what we can pump. So, so the other thing I'll mention is that we have to have a coordinated approach. I talked before about designing retarding basins, but what's happening at the moment is that we design each retarding basin in isolation. We design each of them to attenuate the peak flow coming from that retarding basin. But often, no one's thinking about what happens downstream. What if we have 5 of these developments in a row and they all retard the flow and they all retard it by 24 hours? What happens at the bottom end of that? All the water comes out at the same time and we end up with the same problem essentially. So we're not actually solving the problem. So this is Mildura East. So this is Mildura Township. Here you can see the lots and the development. And this is the area that's adjacent to the town. So at the moment, I should have grabbed you some photos, but at the moment this is mostly vineyards. They're growing grapes for wine, they're growing oranges, things like that. Lots of sun, and they've also got lots of water because they can pump water from the Murray. So it's a big irrigation district and a lot of farming in this area. But the grape growers, a lot of them are getting older. They're in their 50s, they're in the 60s, they're in the 70s. They're sitting on a big chunk of land, and that's their nest egg so that they can retire. So what they're counting on is that some rich developer is going to come along and buy up their block of land, pay them out for their farm, they're going to be able to go and buy a house in town and live comfortably, and the developer is going to develop that block of land for housing. There's housing pressures to create more houses for Mildura, so they're looking to expand out here and build more houses. It's quite a big area, this. So what we're looking at is that if that happens and all this area starts becoming developed and starts turning into houses, we need to have some way of managing the flows through this area. So we're looking at where would the drainage lines go, where can we put detention basins, so what are the low points within this land so that we can collect the water and then pass it on to the next one. Now, again, this is really flat and it doesn't actually all just drain neatly back to the river. So we get the water to a certain point and then we have to pump it to the next one. And then we can drain it out from there, maybe, if we're lucky, and get it out through the main wetland and retarding basin in the town and get it out to the Murray. So we're looking at a series of retarding basins and each of them has to pump to the next one. So the design gets really tricky now because we're not just designing one system, we're designing 3 in series. And what happens here is very much determined by what's happening here. And then we go to Ironpool, which is a little township just to the south of this area here. And Ironpool's a really nice little township and everyone likes it and they want to live there and retire and buy their house here. But as I said, everything is draining into the middle of town. Literally. So here's another image. So this is showing what you can see here. These are the existing retarding basins that have been built. And then there's a big one in the centre of town that's been built to try and protect the town from the flooding. So they got flooded really badly back in 2010, about the same time you guys had some really bad floods in Bangkok, and they had similar problems. The whole town went under, lots of issues, people weren't very happy about it. So they're looking at what they can do to try and address that, but on a much smaller scale. So what we're looking at is what retarding basins do we need to build around the town to try and capture all the water coming off all these new developments that we're putting around it so that we can manage the water before it gets into here. And then it comes into this central storage and then we're pumping from here. Our pump is 400 litres per second. So not even 1 cubic metre per second. It's like a teaspoon, it's like scooping the water out with a teaspoon. It's nothing. With much smaller area, it's still really tiny. I think we're getting about 20 cubic metres per second coming into that storage at the peak flow. So we've got 20 cubic metres per second coming in, we've got 0.4 going out. So it may as well be nothing. Wouldn't make any difference. So what they're trying to do is plan for these future retarding basins. And they're looking to set aside the land because the land is currently farmland and it hasn't been rezoned as residential yet. When they rezone that land as residential, the value of that land will go up tenfold. Same problem as you're having in Thailand at the moment. So what the council is doing is they've said, okay, these are the areas we need. What they're doing is they're putting public acquisition overlays on those as a signal so that people know this land is going to be a retarding basin and we're going to purchase this land off you. And what they're also looking to do is not only do that, but to actually go in and buy the land before the rezoning happens so that they're not paying full residential land rates to buy that land so that they have to pay a fortune to get it. We're also looking to change the design requirements so that when someone designs one of these basins, that they have to consider the impacts on the whole system and not just look at their development and go, oh look, I designed my system, my development works fine, but I don't care what happens downstream. Now they have to consider the whole system and look at what's happening further downstream. We're then looking at, we're putting these retarding basins in, we may as well put wetlands in too. Now, Mildura has the same problem that you have with the wet season and the dry season. They go for quite long periods where it's really dry as well. So what we're looking at is that these wetlands will be deeper than we normally design them, so that the deep pools won't dry out completely in the summer period. And there's also the option there, because they've got irrigation channels, we're also looking at that we may actually top up some of these wetlands with irrigation water in the dry season just to make sure they don't dry out completely. And then we're looking at other opportunities. Can we get some green infrastructure? Can we get some biofilters? Can we get some swales and other things in? Can we get some walking trails and some shade to make the area a bit nicer and make it easier for people to move around? So when they've got a hot day, they've actually got a shady trail that they can walk along or ride along to get around town. So does this look familiar? So we've got irrigation channels too. So these they crisscross all through that area. So part of the challenge in designing the drainage is that this area is developing and it's becoming an urban area, but it's not happening instantaneously. So on the one hand, we have to design new urban drainage to try and get retarding basins and get the flow out from the new urban areas. But at the same time, they want to maintain the irrigation channels so that those farmers that still want to keep farming the land can continue to operate their farms and continue to farm. And obviously, as farms drop off, the viability of these channels becomes difficult, because if you've got 10 farmers paying for that channel, you can justify paying for it and maintaining, keeping it operational. But when you've only got 5 or 4 or 3, you reach a point where you say, it's no longer worth our while to keep operating this channel, we need to decommission it and shut it down. But that might be 20 years away or 30 years away. So we've got to try and design the drainage so that we can get the water out and take it where it needs to go, but then we've got to also keep these irrigation channels intact and operational for those people that want to continue using them. There's also some challenges about public safety here, because the developers want to build their development right up to the edge of these channels, but then we know what happens next is we've got a whole bunch of people living here, and then someone says, oh, this isn't safe. What if a kid falls into this channel and drowns? We can't have that. We need to get rid of the irrigation channel. So we've also got to manage all these safety aspects of having farm infrastructure sitting right next to urban infrastructure. So here's where we have a situation where we don't have a clean cut where that's the farm, that's the city, but the two are now coming together and merging together. I'm sure you've got spots in places in Thailand where that's happening a little bit, where you've got towns in the agricultural areas. You've got these challenges. So there's some of the challenges that we're trying to work through. The other thing is that from a community point of view, there's some farmers here who really want to keep managing and operating their farms, and there's some that really want to sell their land. And sometimes the people that want to sell their land aren't the logical ones that should be next off the list. So, logically you've got a town here, you want this block to develop next, and then this one, and then this one. But what we have is this farmer here is ready to retire, and he wants to sell his land to a developer and develop. But these farmers want to keep farming. We've got nowhere to put the retarding basin because that's where that's planned to go. And there's no drainage for this area to get it back to town because that's also got to run through someone else's land. So we've got all those timing challenges of how do we sequence the development so that we say who can develop first and what areas can develop first, and how do we release that land in such a way that we're able to build the drainage infrastructure and sequence that out, keep the irrigation infrastructure still connected and operational, and then manage all those different people's expectations. And then it gets political because we've got a small regional council. They're very prone to being influenced by, shall we say, certain powerful people in the area. So lots of challenges. So this is part of that large retarding basin I showed you in the centre of town. There is a separate large retarding basin area, but this is another part of it. And what they've done here is that they've built a retarding basin, but they've also recognised that this is only going to flood every 5 years or every 10 years. So they said, well, let's play soccer on it. Why not? This is a soccer field. Yeah. The kids can clear it out when it floods, Okay, flood, do its thing. You're going to have some mud to get rid of and stuff to deal with, but okay, if it doesn't happen too often, that's okay, you deal with it. But then the rest of the time, that's providing a function and a purpose. And importantly, because it's got a use and a purpose, it means that someone can't then take that land and turn it into development or do something else with it, because it's now publicly owned land. It's used for flood detention, but it's also providing a purpose as open space and recreation. And that's also important to justify the land that we're taking, because we're now taking a huge chunk of land right in the centre of town for flood detention, and then we're telling the council that actually you need to expand this land by a few hectares of prime development land right in the middle of town, because that's the only way they're going to be able to manage all the flooding that's coming into this centre of town that they've got. So the other area that I showed you, that drains north, and then it goes into another detention basin, and in that detention basin they've built a huge wetland, really large. So a couple of photos of the wetland. To give you an idea of the size, that's the inlet to the wetland. So that gives you an idea of how big the wetland is if you've got pipes like that coming into it. So it's quite a large area. And that's become a refuge for all sorts of different creatures. So we've got educational signage there, just helping people understand what are all the different plant species, what are all the different fish species that are growing in that wetland. But then that area is also acting as flood detention and holding water, so it's helping to protect the township. So we're dealing with some similar challenges to what you've got. And it comes back to that question of how much storage do we need versus how much bypass, how do we get the water out. So I think that's probably a good point to pause and maybe come back and revisit your, your challenge that we had here.
Yeah.
So any questions though before we talk about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have similar approaches when you're doing new development areas in Thailand?
Yes.
Or even for how you're managing some of the areas in the agricultural areas?
Yes. We try to use the farmland to reduce the peak before come to the Bangkok.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe the same concept.
Same concept. But you're actually using the farmland itself.
Yeah. But now we still have the problem because the climate change. For the effect of the climate change.
Yeah.
The data that we simulate in the past time it changed.
Yeah.
And we have more big flood than in the past.
Yeah.
And we need more land.
Yeah. It's hard to find more land. Yeah. So how do you use the farms to mitigate the flooding? Do you intentionally allow the farms to flood during a flood event? You allow some of that water to go through the irrigation channels and flood the farmland, or you just allow the water that's falling on the farms to stay on the farms? How do you use them for flood mitigation?
In Pisanulok province, we try to use farmland to be like a retard area.
Yeah.
And we try to have a promotion with the farmer.
Yeah.
You can crop before the flood come, and we give them the water.
Yeah, to crop.
First, it start first, then another area allow.
Yeah.
And they can cultivate before the flood come. And when the time that water storage in their land, the Department of Fishery come to put the fish.
Oh, they put the fish.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this fish can grow only in 3 months, something like that.
Yeah.
And the farmer, the old land can cultivate the fish.
Yeah.
And they can sell and get the income in the
fish.
in the flood time.
Yeah. Okay.
And they also happy about that because they can get the income first from the paddy field.
Yeah.
Because they can crop before another, and they can cultivate before the flood come.
Yeah.
And they can get the second income from the fish.
From the fish.
Yeah. but now it have some people don't agree with system.
Yeah. Okay.
They because they come and they why I need to store it this water for the downtown. You need to pay me compensate. Now we have the new problem
Yeah.
because the different thinking.
Yeah.
For the long time they already accept this concept.
Yeah.
But when like a political come
Yeah.
and they said, why I need to solve for you?
Yeah.
You must pay me compensate.
Yeah.
Now it still have a problem and
Yeah.
we try to solve. It's very fun, but it's still
Yeah.
it has already have
Yeah.
this happened.
And in fairness, they're not wrong because the farms are providing a service to the city because they're storing the floodwater and
Yeah,
protecting the
yeah,
city
yeah,
from
yeah.
being flooded. So they've got a case potentially. But during the wet season, would you assume that all the farms are flooded, or you just flood some of the farms and other areas are left not flooded?
on
เลือกได้หรือว่าแค่เอาหมดเลย
on the
Oh.
We control the area by the contour
Yeah.
and we set the contour that's like
Yeah.
plus 200 something like that.
Yeah. So you flood the
Yeah.
lower contour land,
Yeah.
but then the upper land you leave.
Yeah. If the land is higher than the level we control it.
Set.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So does that happen every wet season or just when you have floods?
Every year.
Every year.
Every year.
Yeah. So they're used to that and they've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah. 2 years ago we started concept.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the people who start with us accept this concept.
Yeah. Okay.
But after 2 years, did have new political come
ideas, yeah.
and now that you must don't do that. You need to get a compensate from the government, something like that.
So
And it's very hard because the people who protest is in the middle of this area.
Yeah.
If he near the
Near the edges.
near the outside, it we can cut
Yeah.
by construction the pole, something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Polder, something like that.
Yeah.
But
If they're in the middle,
the
you
people
can't-
who protest is in the middle.
Very difficult. You can't isolate them.
From what I heard, the people who initiate the protest is outside the project area.
He is a local authority. Obata.
Who protest.
Yes.
But initially the idea of the crop cycle
Yeah.
management idea is to cut down compensation budget
Yeah. Cut
instead
down
of
compensation.
paying compensation.
Give them water instead.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, you could take the other view that you're giving them water for free so that they can grow fish.
Because when this this area can get the water early than nearly area.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
Like
that
we
they can harvest.
in normal they in general the farmer can get the water in May, but this area can get in April.
April.
Oh, yeah.
Something,
So
yeah.
1 month earlier.
Yeah.
So they can harvest the crop before the wet season hits. So you can
And
flood.
they can have it in the August.
Yeah.
And in general, this area the flood come in September, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And because they hold the water, we cut down a lot of water that comes down
Yeah.
เจ้าพระยา
Yeah.
system.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense because you can try and buy land to do a retarding basin, but that's going to be a drop in the ocean. If you can use a huge chunk of farmland,
Yeah.
then you don't need a lot of depth. You can get a lot of volume of storage very easily. So, how many crop cycles a year do you get with your rice?
In general, two.
Two.
In rainy and dry.
So, yeah.
Rainy season they use the rain.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and dry season they use the water from the irrigation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get one rainfall, one irrigation,
Yeah.
and then they can get they can grow the fish through the wet season to harvest fish if they want to.
But for dry year, we ask them not to do the second crop in dry season.
Some
Dry
year.
year, because you don't have enough water to
We would
irrigate.
announce like at the beginning of
พฤษภา
พฤศจิกา November.
Okay.
Beginning of November, we would know how much
How much
water we
water you
have
have.
in the storage.
Yeah.
How do you enforce that?
Enforce.
Is it just because there's not enough water?
We announce that we announce for no second crop in certain area. If they do and their crop damage, we don't pay compensation.
Yeah. So they can grow crop if they want, but they're not getting any water salts
At
on
their
them.
own risk.
Yeah.
I see. So
Yeah.
it's a risk.
In Thailand law, we can't stop the people who crop in their land.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough.
No law to control that.
Yeah.
Just only allow, and you must know this year it water is enough. It depends on you. You want to list or not.
Yeah.
If you want to list, if you damage,
Yeah.
you will respond yourself, something like that.
Yeah.
Because we would not allocate water in the
To
system.
that area. So would you, if you were giving them water and then you had a shortfall, do you pay compensation if you can't give them enough water and you've promised it for that year? Or
For
you just wouldn't, you
For the
wouldn't tell
year
them
that
that there's a
we-
second crop?
that we do not
No.
announce the second crop.
Yeah. Okay.
It depends if for really dry year
Yeah.
and a drought area,
Yeah.
provincial of the province
Yeah.
municipality would declare
Drought.
a drought. Yeah, and then
Yeah. And then you
farmer
won't
get
provide water. Yeah. So does that mean no, if you've got a drought year, no one gets water? None of the farmers get irrigation water?
we still have to release some water to
Maintain
maintain
the channel.
the system to
Yeah.
keep the biological
Yeah.
condition
Yeah.
and for some household consumption
Yeah. For
So-
domestic user.
the
Yeah.
same canal. Just hopefully farmers don't.
Like in
Okay.
จ้า
So
พระยา
hoping the farmers don't take the water and then take it
Right.
away.
like in เจ้าพระยา river, we have the big dam called, the name is Bhumipol Dam, to provide the water along the เจ้าพระยา river,
Yeah.
includes Bangkok. And when the dry year, we control the priority.
Yeah.
The first one is domestic use.
Yeah.
The second one is for the
Environmental.
Yeah.
Flow.
and third one is for agricultural, and fourth one is for industry, something like that. That maybe 4 years ago, the water in the dam is not enough, and they now the people, farmer along the river don't do the second crop
Yeah.
because the water in the Bhumipol Dam need to be domestic use in Bangkok.
Yeah.
And you think I'm stand in the bank of river and I saw in the river have a water, but government said you don't use it. This is water is for Bangkok people. What do you think? What do you think? Yeah, correct. Yeah,
It's political to
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why I can't use it?
And then,
Why I concerned about the Bangkok? It's same human, same
right.
country. Why?
Yeah.
And then later, sea water intrusion. People in Bangkok drink,
Using water very freely.
salty public water.
And they complain every day.
People in Bangkok
I'm feel sick.
angry.
I feel sick because the water is very salt. Something like that.
And the dog
Many.
the dog has to drink salt water.
So you have some challenges with the drought.
Yeah. Because why I need to learn about Murray Darling. How it's success.
So the Murray, so interesting story then with the Murray Darling is that when we had drought during the millennium drought, it was very dry in Victoria.
Yeah.
So we built a pipeline called the North-South Pipeline, and it's connecting part of the Murray system running through Bendigo and then running south to Melbourne, so that we can take water from Lake Eildon, which is intended for irrigation in the north, and we can divert that water and we can bring it back to Melbourne. But, same thing, that scheme is very unpopular with people in the north, because they're saying, why are you taking our water? We need that for irrigation. Why are you taking our water and giving it to Melbourne? They're wasting water anyway.
Yeah.
By that stage, Melbourne wasn't wasting water. We don't water the sports fields. We don't water our backyards. We're already cut back on the water use quite a lot already, but it's very unpopular. So then we also, at the same time, we're building the desalination plant. So consider this, the cost of the water from that pipeline is probably 1/4 of the cost from the desalination plant. But when all is said and done, we never turn on that pipeline. We build it, we never use it. We've never used it to this day. That was more than 15 years ago. That pipeline has never been activated. But the desalination plant, we've used a number of times through that time, through the years. 4 times the cost. 4 times the cost. But we still prefer it because politically we can't take water from the north. It's difficult. So, but the other part of that is that the city learnt to save water, and we reduced how much water per person we use. And Canberra also had water restrictions, and they did the same thing. And we built the desalination plant, but by the time we built the desalination plant, because it took 5 years, by the time we finished building it, the drought finished. And we didn't need it anymore. But if we hadn't gone into water restrictions and limited how much water we were using, we would have potentially run out of water in some cities in Australia. So the demand management is what actually made the difference, not the desal. Desal will save us for the next drought, hopefully.
But this year is no problem because all reservoir is full. No problem.
Your reservoirs are full at the moment. But you'll have floods and you'll have droughts, so you've got to be prepared to work with each. But I think that idea of using the farms for floodplain storage is a great idea. Because if you think about it, you don't have to buy the land, and the land is being productively used for other purposes most of the time. Because how often do you have a big flood where you need to use that floodplain land? If you can just use it during the wet season, that's a really good solution. That is a win-win. Maybe you need to work harder on selling to the farmers that if they can grow the fish, they can get some money out of it. Find some case studies where you can show the benefit to them and the communities can see the value. That would help. Look, honestly, maybe you need to consider whether the city should be paying something to help fund the flood mitigation upstream. Maybe there's a tax on Bangkok and they contribute some money and then that's used to help the farmers.
I think
it wouldn't be unreasonable.
They do that in Latin America and also now in Sub-Saharan Africa. In Kenya, they have the Nature Conservancy has set up these water funds. So it has worked in Latin America because they have very small catchments. So the classic case is like Quito and Ecuador has a small catchment, and so the city has a municipal ordinance fund, which they put that money into a trust fund, which is used to compensate farmers and as well as do conservation in the upstream area. And then they also have private sector putting money into that fund. But it works because they have very small catchments.
Much harder to do at a national scale across large catchments.
Although they have done it in the Tana Basin in Kenya. So they did it there was more around managing runoff, pollution and runoff, as well as ensuring there was enough water reaching the reservoirs, because often there's drought. And the problem was in Nairobi, there was not enough water during the dry season. Mixed results.
I agree. Yes, because when I meet my friend in the private sector, and I said to them that when the some year in the dry season, your water that you drink it from the tear of the farmer, and he said, "Oh, I don't know that. It's possible I asked them that it's possible that you can pay something for them, like only 10 baht or 100 baht. It's very small, but in the Bangkok it's 20 million people. If they pay only 100, it's 100 million, something like that, and we can give this to the compensate to the farmer. He want to pay, no problem, but it's not a policy of the government. We must talk together about that. But I think the people who live in Bangkok, if they pay a little, they accept. I think
they would accept.
But how do you define people in Bangkok? No, because in their house legislation may not be in Bangkok.
You can cut
You do the
cut from the salary that you work in the Bangkok. Everybody, not the people who have the อะไรนะสัมมโนครัว
legislation, house legislation.
Just if you can because you need to receive the salary from the company, and the company that you work it stay in Bangkok.
Or that could be part of the water bill. And it could be one additional fee that goes into the water bill for water users within the Bangkok catchment or Bangkok area. But that can be a discussion on when you guys are ready to do water price reform.
I think it have a way, and the people mostly they accept. If not more expensive, just only a little. They and think we can live together with the harmony. Oh, okay. You get the water, and I hard to live, and you pay for it.
So part of this might be building, obviously this would be a long-term project and something that might take years to make happen, but something you might think about is analysing and understanding the system so you can show what would be the consequences of a flood today under the current situation. You know, a flood of a certain size, let's say it's the 2015 floods happened again, what would be the effect on the farmland and where would the water go? What would the consequences be for Bangkok? And how much would that cost? You know, what was the last floods cost? What, $500-600 million and counting? So that was the cost of flooding to Bangkok. If you then said, what if we flooded farmland up to this level and managed the system in this way? How much could we reduce that flooding by? If that means that that's only $300 million, then maybe there's $100 million that you could ask Bangkok people to pay that then could be used to make a solution possible for the farmers. And then you can say, if we did this, would that be enough money to incentivise the farmers to do the work? So that might be the long term, the big picture, and you could look at building a business case and looking at different scenarios for that. But I think in the short term it might be worth looking at small scale trials where you work with the farmers that are willing and say, if we give you your water early so you can get your crop, we then give you water over the wet season for your fish. Maybe you give them a higher guarantee of water. You know, maybe those farmers that are part of that program get water in the dry years, because you can get water to some farmers but not everyone. Work out some kind of system so that there's an incentive for them to be part of the program. Maybe there's some way to do it on a small scale, but as a proof of concept so that you can show that the system works and that you're able to store the water. I mean, you're already doing it, that sounds like you've been doing it for 2 years, did you say? With some challenges. But maybe keep going with those small ones because you can do that today and look at how you can get that storage. But maybe you can start using some of these detention, retention and conveyance concepts to quantify what the benefit is and what difference does that make to that bypass? Does that mean that instead of a 200 cubic metre per second bypass, that maybe that's a 150 cubic metre per second bypass because you've got all that flood storage? You could start understanding how that might work and into play. And then if you have some trials where you can show how it's working and that it can work, and then you've got a business case you can take, that makes it easier to go to other departments and say, we have a better idea for solving flooding. So when they say we need to build a $5 billion tunnel or something like that, you can say, well, or maybe we could do this instead. And then, rather than spending on a huge amount of engineering infrastructure that just gets flooding away from Bangkok, you could have something that helps to solve the flooding in Bangkok, but is also bringing some money back to the agricultural areas and is helping the agricultural communities as well. So that then actually becomes a strong political argument both ways for why you might do this approach rather than just doing downstream engineering solutions and just keep trying to get the water away ever faster. Because we're chasing a losing battle doing that because, as you said, climate change, more and more catchment contributing, more and more things going on, it gets harder and harder. So,
Yes.
something to think about. Does anyone have any more thoughts on flood mitigation?
How are we running for time? How much slides you
Let's have a look.
It's 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, so we've got an hour. Shall we go through?
Do we have a break?
Yeah, do you want to have a break?
What time is it? 3 o'clock.
Skip over that. I've got some stuff on urban heat and street trees, but it would be more useful to talk about rainwater tanks and stormwater harvesting. I might get that to the group.
Do you want to have some?
I can talk about urban heat,
Yeah.
passively irrigated street trees, rainwater tanks, stormwater harvesting. Do you have any of those that are of greater interest? Because I probably won't get through everything today.
Yeah, I think we can get the concept, and if some time we can apply to our system, no problem.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough time to go through.
Okay,
everything.
up to you.
So the topics for you to choose: urban heat,
Yeah.
rainwater tanks, stormwater harvesting, and street trees.
If you have a handout and can we lead by ourselves, no problem.
Yeah. We'll give you the presentation so you'll have a look.
I think stormwater harvesting. Yeah, those
Or you can summarize quickly, only 5 minutes, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, and then maybe briefly.
Go back, depending on time.
Yeah.
We started after 9 o'clock. Also, I just need 10 minutes at the end.
Yeah.
And on the presentation. So I'll talk a little bit about flow volumes because it's got some relevance for your mitigation as well. So in Australia, we're starting to get our head around this concept that when we urbanise an area, we take away the forest, that we get way more runoff. Now, it's worth saying that when we go from forest to agriculture in Victoria, we see a bit of a shift, but it's not a massive shift. When we go from agriculture to urban, we see a huge jump in the amount of runoff. Now, in tropical areas, you might find that works a little differently. You might find that when you lose forested areas and you go to agriculture, you get a big increase in the runoff. You get a shift in the soil structure, you lose all that dense canopy that's supporting those areas. So when you get those upland forested areas get converted into illegal agriculture, you probably get a significant increase in the runoff from those areas. That's quite a bit more than you would have naturally. So that's actually already causing quite a problem for you. When that area shifts to urbanisation, you'll get a lift again, but it won't be quite as severe potentially. So just be aware of that difference for your areas. When we start to look at this and compare it with our waterways, what we see is that as we make our catchments more impervious, so more urban surfaces, more cities, more towns, more roads, more buildings, the ecology of those waterways drops. You can see it's pretty, it's all over the place with the dots, but you can see a pretty clear trend line. More impervious means poorer ecological condition. If we plot it up with another one, this is looking at what we call effective impervious. So not just the impervious areas, but the bits that are actually connected to drainage. And we start to see we've got an even clearer signal, and it actually drops pretty drastically at a low impervious fraction, and then it flattens out. So once you get to Bangkok or Melbourne style urbanisation, it's gone. We've lost any ecology that was in those waterways. It's long wiped out. But those those marginal creeks that are at the edges that have got, you know, a couple of small towns in them, a couple of villages, you know, a little city starting to establish, they're the ones that are on the edge. They might still have quite good ecology, but it only takes a little bit of urbanisation to tip them over, and then the quality starts dropping and the health of the waterway drops away. Now, obviously, it's not that clean cut because there's also agriculture, and that will also impact on the health of the waterway and the fish and everything within it. But what we're starting to understand is that it's not just the pollutants coming off those urban waterways, which we used to assume, but it's also the flow and the changes in the flow patterns. It's the frequency, it's the flow volume, it's the amount of erosion that's occurring in the system. So what we're starting to do now in Victoria is say we actually want to set some objectives where we've got a really high value waterway that we want to protect. We want to take out most of the water that's been generated from an urban area. And naturally it would have evapotranspired with plants, so we'd like to do that again. But of course that's not possible because we've put buildings over most of that footprint, over most of that catchment, so we can't plant trees on it. So what we suggest is either we get rid of it through evapotranspiration, or maybe we just harvest that water. As long as it's taken out of the system and it's not going into the waterway, it will still protect the waterway. It won't solve all the problems, but it will solve one. And then the other thing that was thrown up is that when we pave all those areas, we stop the water from naturally infiltrating. And then that stops water from infiltrating into the ground, going through the soil, coming out as base flow in the waterway, and keeping it flowing during periods in between storm events. So that flow that you might still have going into the dry season after the wet season has ended and the water's still flowing, that's your base flow that's coming out after that's ended. And it might continue for days or weeks after your last rainfall. But it's recognising that we're losing that and that we need to infiltrate more water into the area that we've got left. And you've got problems in Bangkok because your groundwater levels are dropping, and that's mostly due to extraction, but it's also because you've paved a lot of areas, so there's less infiltration that's able to occur in those areas as well. So it's been a lengthy journey like the other one I put up, but we've been going through this of recognising these issues. Melbourne Water's got a strategy in place called its Healthy Waterway Strategy. We've amended our EPA Act. We've written stormwater management guidance that recognise these issues, and we're just at the start of the journey of starting to address these. The objectives are out there, they're not being widely enforced yet. But basically we've got the same quality stuff that we got 26 years ago, and then we're also introducing these flow objectives. So what that's pushing us towards is now saying we need to not only do stormwater quality, but we also need to do stormwater volume for the purpose of protecting the waterways. But it's convenient because if we reduce volume to protect the waterways, that also helps a little bit with flood mitigation. Right, no rainwater tank's going to stop your flood problems in Thailand, but it does help take a bit of volume out of the system. But it also has another benefit, and that is that it helps to reduce the amount of drinking water we need to take from our dam because we've got a rainwater tank supplying water. So there's 3 different problems that we can start to attack now with the same kind of system. Yep. So rainwater tanks are something that we've been working with for a long time in Australia now. Probably 20-25 years we've been putting them in. In terms of history, it's worth keeping in mind that when we established the urban water supply systems in Australia, they had a problem because people were already using rainwater tanks and they had enough water and they didn't need to connect to the urban water supply. So they banned rainwater tanks in urban areas and said you're not allowed to have a rainwater tank because the water might be polluted and there's a health risk. So no rainwater tanks. And it was twofold. One is to manage the health risk of the tanks, but secondly to make the urban water supply system viable because there was enough people paying for it. Now we've come full circle and the water supply authorities have realised that we've got a shortage of water and we're going to have to build new infrastructure to get more water, and we're running out of rivers to dam. We just can't get much more water out of those systems anymore, and the alternatives are either really expensive dams or desalination, which is 5 times or 6 times the cost of our dam water that we're getting now. So the alternatives are expensive. So what they've realised is that if we can get people to build rainwater tanks on their house, they can use that to flush their toilets. Do we really need drinking water to flush a toilet? Probably not. They can get people to use that for their garden. I've got 3 tanks at home, so my garden gets heaps of water before I have to worry about using the potable water that I've got to pay for. And then we can also use it for other things, like we're even using it for laundry these days, which obviously is a bit of a step because you've got to really make sure that the water's clean before you put it in someone's clothes washer. But we're starting to get there with that now. So systems like this will reduce the amount of flow that's going to the waterway. It'll help to reduce the potable water that we need, and then it can also help to reduce the flooding just a little bit. And we always get the question, but what if the rainwater tank's full when the flood starts? Like, what if it's full? But what they forget is that flooding isn't just a peak flow problem. Flooding is a volume problem. It's about how you manage the volume over the course of the whole event. So if we can capture some of the volume in the system, in the tanks, that is then not sitting in the drainage system and moving through the drainage system. So it's still addressing some of the problem. And we actually have calculated that, I'll come to that in a minute. Yeah, so it'll provide these benefits. The other thing is that when we talk about nutrients, what we forget is that a lot of the nitrogen in an urban area comes from the atmosphere. So the problem actually isn't fertiliser, which it is absolutely is in the agricultural areas, but it's actually nitrogen from the atmosphere. And we say, well, that's natural, that's okay, right? It should be there. But now the flow volume is 3 times what it used to be, because we've got all the rainfall landing on buildings and running off, whereas naturally it would have been absorbed into the ground and sent back to the atmosphere with the plants. So if you've got 3 times the flow, you've got 3 times the load. So we've got all this extra load of nutrients going into our bay. So then we're saying, well, how do we deal with that? Well, we don't have to treat the water. If we use a rainwater tank and we use that water, it's not in the waterway anymore. It will make its way through the system in some way, shape or form, might go through the sewage plant and whatever, but we've reduced the amount of water that's running out of that catchment to the bay. So typical design, you've got a roof, usually we'll have a leaf filter or screen. You might have what we call a first flush device that just takes the first little bit of water off the roof, lets that discharge and then closes up so the rest of the water goes into the tank. The water goes into our tank, and then usually we'll have a little pump and then a controller on the pump that says if there's water in the tank, take the water from the tank. When the tank runs dry, just switch over and automatically use the potable system. So the householder doesn't have to stress about, oh, my tank's run out of water, I better go switch it over, because no one wants to be doing that. Just automatically switches between them. So that's a typical setup that we'll have. Then we'll set that up, and it might go to garden irrigation, it might go to the toilets, we might even send it to the laundry these days. They're the main uses we use it for. We usually don't use it for drinking. And the advice is, if you've got a town water supply, use the town water supply for drinking, because we know that water is safe to drink. However, the practical reality is that most of the people living in rural areas in Australia, outside the towns, don't have a town water supply, and they rely entirely on tanks, and they drink it, and they survive just fine. They don't seem to get sick at a higher rate or any of that, amazingly. So this is a bit more detail of the function. So you've got, as I said, you've got that rain head that's diverting leaves. You've got the first flush that's catching some of the water. You can have internal pumps within the tank, or you can have an external one sitting outside it. Lots of different ways of setting it up. And then very important, where we've got the mains water coming in, we need to have an isolation valve so that the water from the tank can't back water into the main system and pollute the potable water that's in the main system if we have a problem with the tank, or if we have a problem with the system. So we'll have what we call a non-return valve so that the water can only go one way. So a few things we need to think about is we need to get as much roof as possible into this tank. The more roof, the more water you get. We need to hook it up to as many different uses of water as we can, because the more water we're using, the faster we can empty the tank, the more water we use, the more benefit we get. And then we've got to make the tank the right size to balance it with the size of the roof and the amount of water we're using, so that we're getting a suitable balance between them, and that the tank's not costing us too much money. So it comes down to this sort of sizing thing to try and balance those 3. So in Melbourne, we have a rough rule of thumb that if you've got a 100 square metre roof, you need about 2 kilolitres of rainwater tank. So if you see a townhouse in Melbourne, that's usually about 100, 150 square metres. So a 2 kilolitre tank, so it's about 1 square metre, 2 metres tall. That's enough tank for a townhouse of that size. If we go to a full-size detached house in Australia, then we probably need a tank about twice that size. But they've got more space in the backyard, so it's not such a big challenge. So that's what we're aiming for. And we've now got quite a lot of houses throughout Melbourne that have tanks connected. So at the end of the Millennium Drought, it was estimated that about 30% of the houses throughout Melbourne have actually got rainwater tanks. Now, the reality is that most of those tanks were installed by people themselves, and they were just connected for irrigation because we told them they weren't allowed to irrigate during that period, so they're just using them for irrigation. So we've got 30% of the houses have tanks, but most of them are not actually connected up to toilet laundry irrigation like we'd like. But they still contribute quite a bit of water savings or water reductions. So we estimate that rainwater tanks in Melbourne are saving about 10 gigalitres of water a year in water. So to put that in perspective, Melbourne uses about 500 gigalitres of water a year. So it's not much in the scheme of things, but it's not nothing either. So a few more design considerations. One of the main things to think about with tanks is to make sure that the roof is clean. So make sure that we're cleaning out the gutters, make sure that there's some kind of leaf diverter so it's stopping any leaves getting into the system, and also that there's a mosquito screen so that mosquitoes can't breed in the tank. In the old days we used to put, it's called TERPs, but it's basically putting a thin layer of oil on the top of the tank to stop the mosquitoes breeding. That's not great for your health. So we put a screen on the inlet so that the mozzies can't get in. So places that work well, residential, commercial, larger buildings, new buildings where we've got control over where things are going. Where it gets harder is really small lots that have got limited roof areas, where half the house is draining to the front, half is going to the back. We can't get all the roof to a tank. There's all sorts of challenges, so they don't work as well. And the other thing you might want to consider is this sort of risk of contamination of the runoff coming off the roof. So if you've got heavy industry in an area that's putting contaminants into the air, you might not necessarily want to be putting rainwater tanks in that area because any heavy metals and other stuff that's in the air might be falling onto that roof and getting taken up into that tank. So heavy metals, hydrocarbons, that sort of thing. So it's worth keeping in mind heavy industrial areas, probably not the spot for tanks because you've got much more of that than we do here in Australia these days. And flood mitigation. If you get a really big flood, rainwater tanks are not going to do anything. They're not going to save the day. Let's be honest, let's be upfront, let's not pretend they're going to work. But what we also know is that in an urban area, a lot of the flood damages actually occur when you get flooding in a local area from really high intensity rainfall hitting that area and causing what we call pluvial flooding or rainfall driven flooding. So if the river floods, all bets are off. We're not going to stop and do anything with the river. But if the local area floods just from that rainfall falling directly on it, that accounts for quite a significant portion of the overall flood damages for a lot of areas, especially where you're protected from the river flooding. And what we also know is it's actually not that 1% AEP or 1 in 100 year design storm event that actually causes the damage. It's actually the really frequent events, so the 2 year, the 5 year, the 10 year storm event that cause most of the damage. And guess what? Rainwater tanks actually can capture a decent amount of those events because they're not so big and they don't last for so long. So the rainwater tanks can actually be useful at attenuating some of these events. And there's been some work done that's looked at catchments and said, what if we put a rainwater tank on every single house in this catchment? What would it do to the flooding? And they've done proper modelling of all the tanks within the catchment. They've looked at 2D hydraulic modelling to understand what the impacts would be and how many houses would be flooding and what the damages would be. And they estimate that in that particular catchment alone, we could drop the flood damages from about $10 million to about $7 million throughout that area. Now, of course that looks great, but I can tell you that the tanks probably cost more than $3 million to put them in. Well, that's $3 million a year that we're saving in flood damages. Some of the work we've done suggests that these flood damages in built up urban areas, if we went back and retrofitted tanks, that the flood damages would probably save as much money as the potable water savings, because potable water is cheap. So it would actually save as much money through flood mitigation as it would save through potable water savings, which is mainly why people are putting the tanks in, because they're trying to save money on their water bill. But what if the insurance company gave them a $100 discount on their bill if they put a tank in, because they know that all the houses in that catchment are not going to have as much flooding? Then people would have double the incentive to go and put rainwater tanks on their house. More people would do it, and the insurance companies would end up better off overall, because they'd be paying money to people to put in prevention rather than paying money to people for fixing the problems after the fact. So that's rainwater tanks. I'll skim over these. Any questions on rainwater tanks? Makes sense. So I appreciate you're mostly rural areas, so you're probably not going to do too much with the tanks, but maybe you can advocate to your friends in Bangkok that if a few more people in the urban area install tanks, that might be a better look for the people in the country to see that they're doing what they can to save some water.
They have rainwater tanks in Bangkok.
When I was young, my house is many, but it's not a tank, like a jar.
Okay.
It's a jar, and they have a dragon around the jar. Many, but it's not popular now, because the people say that in when I was young, I drink the water from this jar.
Okay.
And used for showering. But now this appear because the people think that the water quality of the water is not good.
Because of the pollution.
Because of the pollution. Then you mentioned that we make sure that the loop is much clean. But now it so many dirty. It's not popular. But long time ago, every house had like this.
Some newer developments might have rainwater tanks, but it's not mandatory. Some new developments like condominiums or maybe department store, they might have their own rainwater tank system to cut down on utility bill, but it's
not mandated. So is it that they're going for Green Star or LEED certification or something?
Some
so they might be
newer
putting that in to
developments
get some points.
Some newer developments go for that.
So you have it, but it's the exception rather than the norm. So,
But the one thing that we never calculate that it can help the flood mitigation. You can compare from 10 to 7. But
you never work that out.
We never calculate about that. Because I think it's like a storm water in the town, only in the town, and the rain come in the town, and every house or every building have the like a water tank that it can reduce the runoff and can help the flood in the street, something like that in the city. But we don't calculate about that. If we can prove this have a big benefit about that, and everybody can help together to collect a little, but many, and can reduce the flood. Maybe it's popular again. If the government can explain them that help a little, everybody help together, and you don't have a problem about flood in the future. Maybe it's success.
We have less problem. When solved it, we might have less. The challenge too is that for potable water saving, if you put the rainwater tank, you save money straight away and it's out of your pocket. But if you build the tank, you reduce the flood risk for everyone in your catchment, but you don't see the benefit to your pocket because you're not saving your own property from flooding, you're saving everyone's collectively. So the challenge is that one person pays but everyone benefits. So maybe there has to be some kind of government incentives or something to get people to do it. But still, that might be a way of justifying that you have some kind of tax credits or something so that the government contributes, an incentive for people to put in rainwater tanks. And this work that I was showing you, that was a piece of research, but we actually used that research to do some work for Melbourne Water to tell them how much incentive they could afford to pay someone, because we said you have to get nitrogen reductions and you're paying money for people to do that, and you want people to reduce their potable use so you don't have to build another desal plant. If you pay people $500 to put in a rainwater tank, then you would get this much benefit, so you'd still be better off as an authority, but then if they have to pay that much less, then they're more likely to put in the tank. So
I agree, because you purpose that use this water for the toilets or irrigate the garden. Because now in Bangkok we use the domestic use from the and already treat for wash the car, for
everything.
And we pay a lot. If we can reduce this cost, I will. Good.
Yeah, I mean, what forced the change in Melbourne is we had a really bad drought, and we said no watering of your garden, no washing your car, no watering parks and gardens. So it was really strict restrictions. And then people said, I want a tank because I want water, and I don't have a choice. So that worked.
Start with the law.
All right, shall we break and take 10 minutes?
Yeah.